Hello, friends. How are you today? I'm coming to you from the storm, the center of the storm. Actually, I'm not in the center. I'm in the storm in California. They say what starts here spreads across the country. We will see. We will see what happens. I'm going to keep this short because my power and phone service and internet have gone on and off about 12 times so far, and now almost everything's off. So I'll keep it short so that I can upload it faster when I get the service. When I saw this series of images, let me go back, actually, this is today's chart, Sunday, let me go back here. When I saw this, it obviously looks like a lot of agitation, and I'm just going to focus, I want to focus on the images, the energy of the images, and significant changes and the energies, and then we can talk more next video. But when I saw this, it was like, let me light this up further. Okay, so it was like light on. I don't know if that's light on, off, on, dim, on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. Okay, and you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of when you're trying to activate or initiate something, and you go, and it made me think about something that occurs in the human energy field. And this is when we come into contact, when we start to come into contact with certain energies. And I think of these energies as having a plasma type field to them. There's also a lot going on with electricity right now, but I want to stick with this other quality where it's really a divine substance. And people experience it different ways. But at first, it's almost like it touches the energy field. It touches the energy field. And when you first feel that touch, it's like, what was that? What was that? And that's when you have your choice to continue and to continue receiving the experience or to stop. Really, I think that's why it happens in these kind of bursts. And that's what this reminded me of. It reminded me of also the intellectual process of awakening, where you receive information, you kind of take a pause and integrate it. You receive, you take a pause. And you see this is happening here into the alpha hertz, with most of the energy, up to the alpha hertz. Okay, because right when this ends here, that's in the alpha hertz. But it's extending further, okay? And certainly the green extends further, so aspects of the human experience. And, the initial contact brought the greatest response in energy, right? All this yellow, all this red, going into the beta where we're thinking about what happened. And then it drops off, right? And maybe it drops off because that's the next part of the experience, or maybe it drops off because some percentage of those experiencing it say, okay, I'm going to just stick with this. That's going to be enough. But some proceed, and then some proceed, and some proceed, and some proceed, and some proceed. What happens is that once you make the choice, right, to continue to receive, the experience expands, as I just described here. But there comes a choice where you're kind of tested, okay? You're kind of tested, and you go through these red experiences, reviewing, bringing traumas to light, bringing emotions to light. But then also making the choice to recommit. Do I want this relationship with divinity? And here's that white and blue line that's still in the high beta hertz, close to the spiritual hertz range. Kind of starts maybe even about here. And it's interesting, the green line in the solidly in the beta range today is very green. But combined with the desire to receive the experience of this connection with this kind of plasma type energy, and it's not ultimately, we learn over time, it's not from outside us, it's from within. So it doesn't matter if there are strange energies from space, or if there are beings that could assist us outside of us. That support is lovely, nice, and helpful. Okay, and sometimes it seems like it's not helpful if it's causing us to shift and we weren't ready, or we thought we weren't ready. But the thing is that this, over time, we learn that it comes from within. Okay, and if it's come from without, that we've given permission at some level for the experience. But then there comes this moment, and that's what I got from this here. There comes this moment where there's this activation where it's just on suddenly, and you're embodying what this is. And it's incredible. It's an incredible experience, but it's not controllable from our human self. I mean, maybe at some point, maybe, how do I say this? When you perfect the relationship with the divine, it's a co-creation. And what I mean by that is, just alone with our humanity, it's not controllable. But when we perfect the relationship with the divine, where we are communing with the divine in the moment, then it becomes a co-creation. And we rise up out of the concept of control to experience. And can we choose our experience in the moment? There is an element of that, yes. And where there's an element of choosing the experience is when we are willing to receive with that divine energy, but then also make the conscious choice to be in our integrity and our understanding over what is in alignment with the highest good and how we receive that, and then making the choice to act on that or not if it's not in alignment with the highest good. So these are fine lines and differentiations, but that's exactly what this reminded me of. It's like you make attempts to start the motor, and then it activates. Other factors come into play, but then it activates within you. Then there's an experience after that activation of integration, okay? And it's like there's a gateway experience. Okay, so maybe this is the gateway here, okay? The two sides. Maybe this whole thing is the gateway, and this initiates us into this broader experience of gateway. But it's big. It's really big. And it's interesting. We haven't really seen the spidery images on the chart lately. I'd say that this is as close as we've gotten to one in recent days and weeks. Because what's not in alignment is revealed through this process. And that's why this is here. Now let's take a look, because there's a significant pattern change I want to show you. Okay, so here's the frequencies, and I've been focused, and still am, on the movement of the red, okay? Staying high here at 19.9-ish. Now we did get a peak to, we did get a peak to 26 in green, closer edging up on the higher end of the range. And interestingly, white has been off of its highs here in the frequency. But let me go to, okay. This was interesting. The peak here in the white resonance of these waves were very, very close. And across the board, actually, in some cases, like with green, it was actually higher in the second gateway. Yeah, it even looks like maybe in red as well. But what this kind of tells me is our human self step forward into the experience, and that we're still engaging a lot with this red energy. Now, here's the pattern change. If you remember, we'd been up and down on waves, okay, and the qualities up to highs of 25 in the red. Well, this is a significant pattern change upon activation here. So this is about 19 to 20 hours. Okay, so that's after this big initiation experience. There's a significant shift in the movement of the qualities. Now they're still spiking upwards here, okay, to over 20 to 24. But the flowy pattern has significantly shifted. And I'm just observing that and saying that it's interesting, and I wonder what that means. Because it feels like there's a big shift that's happening here in energies. This is one of the significant shifts. The other significant shift is this has dipped down here, the frequency for red, as the quality came down, which was part of the pattern. But what's different is that here you have the qualities come down and do this weird spiky thing, but this stays relatively high. So this is another pattern shift, and that's meaningful. I want to show you another one. It's in the solar flares. A couple of major changes have happened in the solar flare patterns. The first is that this whole thing has shifted up. Okay, going back a few days and then for weeks, it was much lower. Okay, in the measurement, the flares have slightly edged up, although they're still below C class. Although there's been quite a few C class recently. But here's the other major pattern shift. You may have noticed, although I didn't address it, I didn't put out the video where I ended up talking about it. Sometimes that happens. But you've seen this big dips here. We've seen this for weeks. Now, I remember reading on the TSIS website some time ago, a couple years ago, I think it was, that they attributed these dips to seasonality a couple years ago when they wrote an article about it, or whenever that was. Now, the interesting thing is when they had written the article, the dips were like this, okay? Like that. They were these little pull-ins. But this year we had this really big pull-in. So the change in the nature of the dips and the depth here, the drop, whether it's seasonality of the way the satellite's moving or something related to that, it's still significantly different. The seasonality showed up significantly different. So that's the first major pattern shift, because you saw there were no dips on the chart we just looked at. Now let me see here. Yeah, this is where it had started changing. And the other thing about it was you've had this really, really thin, narrow line, okay, with almost no movement showing up intermittently with the flares. Go back here. Let's take another look at this. I think you can probably hear the rain out there. Yeah. So this is nice and clear. You can see here where this huge dip started to shift right here on the 14th. Then it shifted to just coming down part way, as it has done. It's been more like this in the past. But you see how the thinning of the flaring as well. And until we get to today, let me do the 23rd. So, similar. So, I just wanted to point this out because what has changed? We had, I think it was 4 major, very large planets that were retrograde that have all now, I believe all of them have now moved direct. And in terms of major changes in, the Schumann or geomagnetics or whatever, that is one of the major changes that's happened. So in the Schumann, we had these vertical white lines for a while. Then we went to this blue, okay, with some little splotches. And now we've had this incredible, I want to say, upgrade of energy. But here's what I want to say about this. This is what I wanted to say. What that bar of light reminded me of, and the experience, it reminded me of the Star Trek episode. In the Star Trek episode, it was from Next Generation. And the Next Generation crew took on this refugee from this planet. And he seemed fairly normal to all of them. Intelligent, normal, engaged with them in a lovely way. As time went on that he was on the ship, he started to have these body flares where it's like he would phase, right? Like almost like a match lighting in his whole system, and it would change the dynamic for a moment. And he would take a pause, like he would have to take a pause, and they searched every medical condition that they could find, but they couldn't figure out what it was. Well, the people from his planet figured out that this man was on the Enterprise. And they rang up the captain, and appeared on the screen. They come up with their ship to this big starship, and they say, we have to take this man into custody. He's ill. He's a rebel. He's I don't know, broken their laws or whatever, by the very nature of his being even. And they said, we've done all these medical assessments. He doesn't appear ill in any way. And he seems, rational and like a law-abiding citizen. Okay, I'm putting this, I don't remember the exact words they use. That's my memory of it. And they said, no, absolutely not. He's a danger to our society. And of course, they go through these meetings and stuff, and then eventually the captain is having a discussion with the people from this planet, and the man comes onto the bridge. And they're like, there he is. And he starts to go, his body starts to go into this phasing where it's like, and it's like, it's almost like he starts flashing in and out, okay? And suddenly, his whole being bursts into this upgraded light form, okay, where he still has a body. It's just filled with light. And that's what I see here. And this is my feeling of what we're experiencing. God lights up the energy of creation, of the Creator. Divinity comes through us when we have gone through the process I described earlier. awakening, of receiving, of walking a path of integrity, of being tested in that, of bringing light to our own darkness within and integrating the whole of who we are. Suddenly God essentially can use us as a vessel, and in co-creation can send that light through us. And it's like when that man phased into this body of light on that Star Trek episode. And once he did that, he agreed to be taken back into custody. I think this is how it ended. Anyway, if not, I may be slightly changing the story, but he said, no, it's okay. I understand now. I understand now. I actually don't really remember. I don't remember if the other crew, the crew of his people ran away in fear, or if he went onto that vessel, or if he just floated down to the planet himself. I don't know. But he left the ship. We're in this process of awakening, but it's an energetic shift. But unlike on Star Trek, it's my experience and belief that this is happening in our human cells, in our human bodies. There's certain beings on this planet that aren't able to do this, and they don't understand necessarily what's happening. And when they see it happening, they get very angry. Okay. As I have mentioned previously, it reminds me of when, before the lockdown started, I had started teaching in-person seminars. And when I did the in-person seminars, I had someone attend, and he was one of these people, and I classify them in a very specific way that I'm not going to go into right now. But he was just more and more agitated with what I was saying and explaining, and which is just stuff I put in my regular videos. But in more detail, okay, because it was a 2-hour seminar, and then we did Q&A, or 1 hour in Q&A. I could tell that it agitated him greatly, and I kept trying to reach out, to give him the floor to speak, to engage, but he was having none of it, and then he left at the end early. And while I have compassion for the fact that he chooses not to engage, and that he feels how he feels, or at that time felt how he felt, I still have the right, as a living child of the Creator, a living child of God, and a living soul in a human body, to embody this physical experience in the way that the divine guides me. The human resonance. It's all about the vibe.